Jonathan Arnott, UKIP MEP for the North East. A bit of background on you. How did you become a UKIP MEP? What were you doing beforehand? And what are kind of your areas of interest?
Well, I've been involved in UKIP since 2001, so I've been a member of UKIP when UKIP was a very, very small party indeed. My background is in teaching, teaching mathematics. I've got a master's degree in maths, so I suppose in the European Parliament, one of the things that I'd like to focus on personally is the budget, making sure that where there is waste, where there are things going on that shouldn't be going on, I think it's up to the UKIP MEPs to be blowing the whistle. I also think it's up to the UKIP MEPs to make sure that we're coming back to the UK, talking to people, letting the people know what's actually going on in Brussels, because there's such a lack of communication between MEPs in Brussels and Strasbourg in general and the British public.
And how are you going to be relating back what you find perhaps from out here to your constituents in the North East? How do you bridge that gap? How do you make that connection?
It is difficult because it's such a massive constituency. That's one of the problems with the voting system, is that everywhere from Darlington to Berwick-on-Tweed, I'm supposed to try to cover that area. But I think actually the focus needs to be on getting back on, just being out there in town centres regularly, making sure that we're there in markets and things like that, and actually going out onto the streets, talking to people, letting them know what's going on. I think that's the kind of thing that people in politics do far, far too little of. And I know it's not going to be possible always to reach, almost 2 million people at the same time, but we've certainly got to try, and that's what's lacking at the moment.
I mean, having all those conversations with people on the street and people contacting you and so forth, are you expecting them to come to you with perhaps problems from the North East that you can perhaps do something about or try and raise out here in the European Parliament? Is that kind of in your mind?
I suppose it is, but then at the same time, the concerns that we hear from people on the streets are concerns on things like uncontrolled immigration, the impact that has on the jobs market in particular. Those are the things that we're hearing time and time again in the campaign, and those are things where only leaving the European Union and having a free trade agreement with Europe, being good neighbours but not governed by Europe, is what is going to actually sort it out. So just going out to Brussels and trying to represent people and doing the best that I possibly can to represent people isn't enough to solve those problems. We need Britain outside the European Union.
How are you planning to balance your time between the work you do here and the work you do back in the constituency? Because you may well be drawn in both directions.
Absolutely, and I think a lot depends on what it's possible to achieve out in Brussels as well. It depends, I don't know at this stage what committee I'm going to be on, for example, and if there's a chance of swaying things, if there's a chance of stemming the tide, doing more than can commute to hold back a tide of European legislation, then on that committee I want to be there putting the case for the North East and seeing what we can do about it. If I'm in a committee where I'm in a minority of one, being outvoted every single time, then actually, rather than waste taxpayers' money being in those committees, at that point it would be much, much better for me to be spending that time back in the UK and letting people know what's going on. So it's a very, very difficult one until I've been there for a few months to give you a direct answer to that one. I'll do my best, is all I can say.